very special guests who have been serving District 109 at an international level. Thank you, Morag, Pat, Elizabeth, and Francesco for your time, and welcome to Mastery Matters. I would like to kick off by asking each of you to briefly introduce yourselves and to share with us how long have you been a Toastmaster for, and which clubs or club do you currently belong to? Pat, would you go first?
Well, thank you so much, David, for that question. I joined Toastmasters in 1983. Now, I know you're thinking I was mere child at the time, and I was, in terms of skills and confidence. I walked into my first Toastmasters meeting on April the 6th, 1983, and I joined. I have been a member, a very active member ever since. And I currently belong to the Rise and Shine Toastmasters Club number 313 in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And we meet on Thursday mornings at 7 a.m.
And hello to all of your club members tonight who might be watching.
Yes.
Francesco, would you tell us about your club and how long you've been a Toastmaster for?
Thank you, David. So I've been a Toastmaster for now 10 years. Not as old as the other guys here, but trying to catch up. Maybe I'll make it. And I belong to Toastmaster Roma. That was my original club, but I'm also a member of Toastmaster Academy Rome. And for this year, I'm also the president of Eloquentia, which is an online advanced club.
Ah, wonderful, wonderful. Great. Elizabeth, what about you? Which clubs do you belong to, and how long have you been a Toastmaster for?
I've been a Toastmaster almost 30 years. I started off in Canada, and in fact, I wonder if Pat and I actually knew each other at that time, but maybe not. And now I live in Gothenburg, Sweden, and I'm a member of 4 clubs. 2 corporate clubs, Lundby Toastmasters and Seafront Toastmasters, which are both at Volvo, and a Swedish-speaking club, Rosenlunds Talar Club, so I can practice my Swedish in presentations, and then an advanced club, Saturday Breakfast Speakers.
Ah, wonderful. Quite a combination there. That's lovely. And Morag, finally, what clubs do you belong to, and how long have you been a Toastmaster for?
Thanks, David. I've been a Toastmaster for 15 years now, and I'm a member of 4 clubs at the moment. The club that I joined right at the very beginning, Erlangen Toastmasters in Erlangen, Germany. It's my home club. And then I'm also a member of Frankly Speaking Toastmasters in Nuremberg, which is an advanced bilingual club, German-English, to help me practice those language skills in the country. And then additionally, I'm a member of 2 fully online clubs. One is called One Country, One World, which has people from all over the world. And finally, In Camera Online Toastmasters. That's a breakfast club, just like Pat's club. Meets Friday morning, 7:30 online. And that's a club we started just earlier this year.
Wonderful. Wow. So continuing to chart clubs, actively involved, all of you, that's already for our members, really something to pay attention to. Thank you. So many watching tonight have been Toastmasters for only a short time, perhaps, and may still remember their first experience. I would like to ask you, Elizabeth, what was your first meeting like? What made it memorable?
Well, it's actually probably the part before I joined that was memorable, because I saw a colleague of mine at work, and she was kind of, to begin with, the shy person. And after she did a presentation, and we were doing lots of them, you kind of wondered what she was trying to say. And then she transformed. Oh, wow. And I noticed this transformation, and I asked her, what did you do? And she said she had joined a Toastmaster club. So I said, okay, I'll follow along. What I remember is that the club was very friendly and open, and invited me to become a member right away, and I did. So it was a good club, and I stayed with that club about 2 years before I moved to another city.
Okay. And as you mentioned, 30 years ago, so quite still a fresh and memorable experience for you there. What about you, Francesco? 10 years ago, you joined a club. What made your first meeting memorable?
Well, the first meeting I attended was in a park. There
Mm.
were 7 other people there, so a very small group, but it was so full of passion. I
Mhm.
immediately became enthusiastic about Toastmaster, and I signed up exactly at that meeting. And I even protested that they were not able to give me a manual immediately because I wanted to have my next speech at the next meeting. But eventually, I did get the manual, grabbing it from the president at the time. And that's how I started my Toastmaster career.
Wow. Wow. And I mean, back in the days, now we're on pathways. So I guess as soon as you get your login details, you can look up your first project. So for those who have joined Toastmasters recently, the manual system is our legacy program. And now, there are still Toastmasters doing that, but most of us have moved on to pathways and it's all electronic. So if you're passionate like Francesco, you can just log in and download and away you go. So all of you have participated at Toastmasters at many levels. And I'd like to ask you, Morag, what was the first club role that you took on in your Toastmasters leadership? And what was that like for you?
Thank you. My first club officer role was Vice President Education. Not something I went looking for, but something that came looking for me. And I still remember being asked to take that role on. The club president of the day and the vice president education of the day came looking for me at the end of a meeting and said, "We'd like to ask you something. And would you be interested in an officer role for the next term?" And yeah, sure, of course. What did you have in mind? And when they said this, they must have seen the look on my face because they immediately said, "Don't worry, we'll help you. And we have a spreadsheet," which was not really that helpful at all. I have to tell you, this was the biggest spreadsheet in the world. And I was so glad once I took over the role that I wrested that spreadsheet and began to then plan meetings in a different way. But I loved it because it went for me from that thing of doing stuff and doing things and tasks to realizing that this is a role where actually you create opportunities for people to meet their goals. You plan those meetings to be interesting and fun for the club, and you're helping someone who is trying to achieve something by creating the opportunities for them. And that for me was the big payback in the role. That went way beyond any spreadsheet, any activity, was that thing of this is a role that really helps people to get where they want to go.
That's wonderful. And I have to ask as a side question then, have you been a VPE more than once? Was that just a one-time only decision, or has it arisen in your Toastmasters life elsewhere?
I have been VP Ed again in another club because I just love that. I love that thing of seeing people develop and of being able to be part of their journey of helping to make it happen for them. So I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but actually, if anyone asks me to do that role, it's really hard to say no.
Oh, okay. So we could ask you again.
Not
I
at
take
the
my
moment.
hat off to you, Morag. It is, for me, the hardest role of the officers team and needs that support, certainly. And I think, as you had your colleagues say at the time, we'll help you. I'm sure they have, and I'm sure you've helped many others as well in that time. I'd like to also ask you that same question, Pat. So what was your first officer role or club role within Toastmasters? And what was it like for you?
Yeah, thank you, David. And thank you, Morag, for sharing your experience, because I was really enjoying it, because I was so grateful for those people like you that say yes to VP of Education so that they don't ask me. So thank you for letting the world know that you're willing to do it again. My first role was secretary.
Mhm.
And to keep in mind that I joined Toastmasters because I was absolutely terrified of being in a room where there were people. I was super shy. I had no confidence. I had no self-esteem. I really had self-beliefs that thought I was ugly, that I was stupid, and I had some work to do. So a secretary was perfect for me because I didn't have to speak in front of people. I didn't have to be public. What I did was I got creative with secretary. So I recorded what happened in the meeting very quietly, but I went to the newspaper of the town where I lived and I asked if we could have a column. And every week I reported what the topic of the speeches were and who delivered them and who delivered table topics and what they spoke about and who won the best speaker and who won the best evaluator and who won the best table topics of the event. And it was a very passive role in terms of the public, but it really raised awareness in our small town that there was actually a group that was practicing, and here's the people that were in it and achieving things. So I really enjoyed that. Not too long ago, I was going through some old papers and I was reminded of this role because I had one of the early columns that I'd written for the weekly newspaper. And I thought, oh yes, I forgot that Marcel was in our club. And, you know, it reminded me of Joseph and some of the people that were in the club. So it was full of memories for me, but perfect. And I will say that what I was really grateful for when I look back on that is that even though I didn't have the confidence or the self-esteem or the presence to step up and speak, that here was a role that was very suited to an introverted, frightened behavior that I had, and yet I could widely promote Toastmasters. And it really solidified my belief in the program and the value of it and the results that I saw. And I think it was the foreshadowing of that I would want to be a lifetime ambassador for this organization. So I'm very grateful for them asking me to be secretary. And I'm grateful that I also said yes.
That's wonderful. And I think for my first role too was secretary for 6 months before being president. And I felt thrust into that role as president, but I'm glad that I'd had 6 months as secretary to really understand the role. But thank you for that insight. And already some comments. This is fantastic. What a wonderful idea. Absolutely. To see how you can spread Toastmasters within your community. And I think we often think about social media these days, but there's still perhaps this idea that you had by connecting with the local community, I think still resonates today. So for anybody out there watching, take Pat's advice. If you're a secretary, you can make more of it and become perhaps a pivotal part of promoting your club in the wider or the smaller community, depending on which city of the world you're living in with Toastmasters. Thank you both. So something I'd like to ask all of you now is what made you decide to continue to evolve your Toastmasters journey higher in the organization? So if you wish to share, I'd love to know, did you have the ambition for international leadership from the beginning? So maybe the next meeting after Francesco received his manual, he thought, I'm on a mission, or not, I don't know. But I'd like to ask you, did it evolve over time? Was it something that you thought about? Did you see someone and thought, oh, wow, I'd like to shoot for that? Francesco, would you like to go first?
Well, I didn't even think there was something outside of that small club in Rome. I only discovered it after a few months, maybe almost 1 year, that there was a reality of clubs outside of Rome, in Italy, and even outside of Italy. And at that point, I started getting interested into that. I had to fight for a few years to become part of that system because Italy was not yet part of a district. And at that point, I was really hooked into it. And I knew I wanted to progress into this organization because I thought the higher I go, the more I can contribute and the more I can spread the word about it and get more people to profit from it. That was my driving force in getting into this leadership system.
Mm-hmm. And I first met you when you were our first division director. No, district director, I apologize. District director of the new 109. So just a couple of years ago, but you obviously had already started that leadership journey. And for those following your path, you've gone on further already, which is wonderful. So thank you. Pat, as our past international president of the panel discussion tonight, tell us a bit more about your ambitions and evolution in leadership.
Well, it's a story that at each step, the next step I took was by encouragement and some push by a mentor or somebody that I really trusted or someone that had done it before. And so that I felt I them to really assess whether I was capable of doing it. So my very first leadership role after I was club president, because I eventually ended up doing that, is that I had a social friend named Lena, and Lena phoned me and she was the district director, or district governor at that time, which I'd never ever heard of. But she phoned me from a city where she lived 400 miles away, and she said, "I need an area governor." And she said, "Will you do that?" And I went, "Okay, what is it?" Because I was a Toastmaster already for 4 years, and I'd never seen an area governor or knew what they did. But I trusted Lena socially, so I said yes. That year, I was area governor of the year because I got a mentor who said to me, "Read all the rules, read the bylaws, read the policy, understand all the boundaries. Don't break any of those rules, but be as creative and as innovative as you can be within them." And so I had great freedom to be an area governor because most of my clubs that I had, which were anywhere from my furthest one away was 4 hours drive one way. The other ones were closer. They were 3 and 2 hours drive away, but they'd never seen an area governor before, so they didn't know what to expect. So we had lots of events that were very innovative and creative in those days. And so I had great fun, and I really got into it. And because of the mentor who encouraged me and was there for me, when I went to, then I hung out because I went to my first international convention, and that was the die being cast. That covered me for the rest of my life. I saw what people could do. I saw Helen Blanchard. I saw leaders step forward and speak like I'd never heard them before. I saw people have fun in leadership and people tell their stories. And from that, I always had a mentor. I always sought a mentor for the next stage. And I really was pulled forward through the organization by mentors and people that encouraged me. I moved after I was a division director in that, or division governor at that time in that district. I moved to another district and started over. It was like I didn't have a DTM, like I'd never done anything in this club, kind of sat back and went, "I think you have to prove yourself to us." So I started over, and I don't like to repeat things. So that's just my personality. I like to explore and learn, but repeating is not super exciting for me. Anyway, I did area governor again and division governor again, and then I ran for the district team. And so I went through the district again. I was encouraged by friends, and then I was basically finished as far as I was concerned until Gary Schmidt, past international president now, phoned me because we had gone through the district roles together. And Gary called me and he said, "I'm running for the board. Why don't you run for the board too?" So I investigated it, and I realized that we already had a director from our region or from our district on the board. So I wasn't eligible to run, but I said, "You run and I'll run next year." He said, "Do you promise?" And I said, "I promise." So that's how I ran for the board. And then I loved the board work. And while I was on the board, I was encouraged by a number of people to consider running for executive committee. And my mentor at that time, we spent a lot of time talking about the pros and cons, because I also had a career that was on the incline. And so it was, something to give serious thought to, because it's not a small commitment. When you run for executive, it's 5 years minimum. And so it's a big commitment. But my mentor, and of course, Gary Schmidt, had then run for executive committee and was on the executive committee. And he's going, come on, let's serve together. And so I said, okay, I trust you. And along with some other people that supported me. So I raised my hand again and had the good fortune and the blessing of being elected and serving in all those roles, and continue to do so. So because of strong mentors and people who believed in me and that actually held me to a level that I couldn't see myself capable of. And the lesson for me from that is that I watch people come into my club now and I go, we don't have any idea where you're going to end up. And I see greatness in you, and I'm going to support that greatness, because I think that's what we need in life, is people who believe in us and see the greatness in us and actually tell us, not just sit there and go, oh, isn't like he could really do something amazing, but to tell us that we can, so that we can start to believe in ourselves. And I think we have a rich heritage of that in Toastmasters. And so I'm grateful. That's why I'm there. I didn't have the vision, but people helped me see it step by step. And I never looked forward to the next step. I always said, I'm busy doing the very best I can in this role. I'll consider the next role when I'm successful at this one. So long story, but a great experience.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
I particularly love a great quote, fun in leadership. So for anyone who, I admit, not yet visited an international convention, but I'm going to put it on my list. And I'd like to see this fun in leadership. And on a personal note, I want to acknowledge Francesco, who saw something in me and said, David, I think you should be the first division director of Austria, which is now 3 years ago. And I feel honored for that mentorship and blessing. So Pat, you've just reignited that idea that we do see things in others and others see things in us that we don't yet see. And it sounds almost like you read it in the management books or Peter Drucker and these kinds of places, but here's an organization where this has been your reality, your lived experience, where you've progressed and moved through to the highest of levels. So thank you for sharing your story there. With time, I'd like to move on to Elizabeth. Please.
I was just going to say, for people to really be aware that when the district leadership committee calls you and asks you to put your name forward, they're saying, we see something in you. They're not saying, oh, you fogged the mirror, you're alive, we need you to fill a space. That's not what they're saying.
Okay.
And the same with the international leadership committee. They see something in you and they're asking you to step forward into your potential. So thanks, David.
A rich insight there. Thank you for that as well. Elizabeth, moving to you, I'd like to ask about your ambitions in international leadership. And were they from the beginning? Did they evolve? What is your journey?
So the short answer is they evolved. But what I saw to begin with is I was asked if I would like to step into the area director role. However, at this point in time, Europe was not a district. So it was at the very beginning. And what I saw from meeting up with other people is that we needed to build leaders to make this a reality, to become a district. And that's what we did. We went out, we built more clubs, we got the leaders together, we had leadership training. And that's what I really saw. There was value in the leadership training. It could serve me at the work I did and serve me within Toastmasters. So when I first became area director, my area, for anybody who's complaining about having to travel a long way, my area was one club in Gothenburg where I live, one club in Stockholm, 500 kilometers away, one club in Copenhagen, at least another 500 kilometers away, and one club in northern Germany, Buxtehude. I don't know how long that was.
Wow.
So that was my area that I had to cover.
Yeah.
But it really built up in me to see the other leaders in the clubs want to grow and expand as well. After the area director role, then I went on to look at, well, what did it mean to be in a role at the district, even though we weren't quite a district then, but we were acting as if we were a district. And that's an important part too. And then I went on and took, each year was a different decision. Okay, well, where is a good role to move into that would serve me, that would serve the district? And as with Pat, there were mentors along the way that I really appreciated. And then eventually I was district governor, as it was called at the time. And in between, I also say I attended the international conventions. And that's, you really get excited because meeting people from all over the world, that was tremendous. So it wasn't just people that I knew in Europe. And Europe is big enough. So knowing all these people in Europe, but then meeting people from all over the world, that was so exciting. What it allowed me to do was in the work I was doing, then I traveled to some of these places and I could look up and say, there's a Toastmaster club. Let's go see what they're doing. And then I could bring home to my club new ideas of things they were doing that were really exciting.
Yeah,
And then eventually, after a little break, after district director and immediate past district director, taking care of my family for a change, then I went on to be region advisor, and I served in that role 2 times. And now I'm international director, and in the second year of my term of that.
Okay, and that's a 2-year term. I mean, I'll ask a little bit more later about your current roles, but good for people to know. And some lovely comments have come in about your commitment there as an AT. Elizabeth, is very extensive, that commitment. So indeed, yeah, it's something you sign up for. And as I'm hearing already, each of you have really made that personal decision to make it work. And already I feel so inspired by all of you. We haven't yet got to Morag, who we'll ask in a moment, but to ask really and feel like, so many people join Toastmasters, as you said earlier, Pat, if I feel shy or I don't speak very well and I want to improve my communication skills. And that, of course, is one thing, and competitions, and people enjoy that spirit of that. But there's a whole rich other side that I'm already feeling from all of you, which is really around the fun in leadership, the chance to take a step up and do something new and exciting, to be asked, to be sharing, to be mentored, and to take that journey. So impressive journeys already.
And I can just add in is I was one of those people who could see the leadership in other people. And I still see it now at our club level and everything is I see something in you.
That's lovely. Maybe if we have time later, I want to delve deeper into that question there. But Morag, I'd like to give you the opportunity now to share with us your ambition in international leadership, as you are now our first VP. And I'll ask you more about that in a moment, but how did you get there and how did it evolve for you?
Thank you, David. I was one of those people who had no intention whatsoever of setting one foot on any leadership path in Toastmasters. I joined Toastmasters to meet people and have fun. That was it. I came to expand my network. I was new in town. I wanted to find people that spoke English and with whom I could exchange ideas, talk, perhaps do some work with. I had no intention. And life was good, I have to say, when I lived in that space. Life was comfortable. And then one day it was club contest time. And this is not the usual route to leadership, I think, but it was mine. And my club persuaded me to compete in the club table topics contest. And that was great. And we have a tradition in our club where it's like as many people as possible be contestants for table topics, because everyone who's a member is eligible, and let's just have fun with it and use it as a bit of a training. I didn't reckon on winning, and I did win. And the club president said to me, will you be able to go on this date to the area contest? And I said to her, what's an area? Because I had no idea.
Mhm.
And she explained, and I said, yeah, I can do that. And I won the area contest, then went to division. I won division and then had to go to district. And when I was asked to go there, it was an absolute no-brainer for me because district conference was going to be in Vienna, where you
Mhm.
are, David.
Mhm.
And it's one of my favorite cities in the world. Of course I'll go to Vienna. Yeah, absolutely. And I still remember that time of walking into the conference hotel, walking into the hallway and looking up, and there was a gallery. And draped around the gallery were the banners of all the clubs in the district. And I suddenly thought, I get it. I am part of something that is so much bigger.
Mm.
And I hadn't seen that as a member of my own club because I didn't particularly visit other clubs,
Mhm.
occasionally perhaps. But now, suddenly, someone had pulled back the curtain on that bigger world of Toastmasters.
Mm.
I got to see district leaders in action. I met people who have become, I would say, lifelong friends.
Mhm.
And one of them I met that weekend was Elizabeth, in fact. She was a contestant in another contest. It was just great fun, but it was so inspiring to see all of these people, to see all of these opportunities. And I came home thinking, that was amazing. If I could do anything, I would get my club to go to district conference.
Mm.
And I got the opportunity in a different way. We were due to have district conference in Frankfurt, and the team that were organising it pulled out quite late on. And my division director called me and said, your team did a great job in hosting the area and division contest this year. Would you be willing to host the district conference? And I said, well, let me speak to the team and we'll see. And the team were immediately, of course we can do that. Yeah, we'll do it. And we did. And within 7 days, we had a venue, a budget, everything in place. And we ran a fabulous conference in the city of Bamberg in Germany, near where we are here. And that, for me, opened a whole series of other doors because I worked closely as the conference chair with the programme quality director, a lady called Ellen Hermans at the time. And Ellen said to me, I'm going to be district director next year. I've loved working with you. Would you be my district admin manager?
Mm.
And I asked, I'd learned from the VP Ed experience, I asked, what does it involve? And there were no spreadsheets, so that was good. I said, okay, I can do that. That sounds like fun. And I did, and I loved it. I still remember the first team meeting where I sat, the finance manager and I sat facing each other thinking, what are these people talking about? They talked a different language. They talked about things we didn't know anything about, but very quickly you become part of that and you start to understand. And even in a role like district admin manager, you're learning so much more about Toastmasters. You're learning so much more about things that underpin what you do, but you never saw them before. And you start to realize how it all works. So having had a great year as district admin manager, the next district director said, would you be interested in another year as district admin manager? And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. That would be great. What I didn't reckon on was the DLC calling. As Pat said earlier, sometimes they call, and they did, and they said, we need you to be division director. Really? Me? Yeah, of course. We see this in you. And so I did. I gave up being the potential new admin manager to be the division director of what was then a division covering my little corner of Germany, the Czech Republic, Austria, and Hungary. So a huge division. And one of my area directors that year was my husband. And that's a whole other relationship that changes when you're put in that position. But it worked. We get on well. We're still friends, so that's okay. After a year as division director, I'd set a strategy for the year. I had the idea that this division was physically so huge, we could make our area director's job much easier if we grew clubs. That was going to be the way to, and we began to grow clubs. And I decided that, I'd love to see this through a second year where we actually start to see much, much more of the structure evolving that makes it possible, more leadership opportunities for people. And so I put my name forward to be the division director the following year. But the DLC came knocking again and said, we need you to run for programme quality director. Okay. And I hadn't banked on that at all. But remember how much I loved being VP Ed? So they were kind of tugging at my heartstrings. And I had the very, very great pleasure of being elected programme quality director in Lisbon in Portugal when Pat was international president and was visiting our district. And she did some of our district officer training for us in Lisbon. So you never know what's going to happen when you step up into district leadership. For me, after that, I then was district director the next year. And as district director, we had an amazing year. We saw the district actually become the #1 district in the whole world for the very first time. I had the great pleasure of building on the success of leaders in the past, of working with amazing teams, really amazing people across the whole continent of Europe. And then later had the chance to serve as region advisor, just as Francesco's doing at the moment. I wasn't really planning on that. I'd been kind of thinking about it. It sounded like a role I would really enjoy. And unfortunately, I'd had to go into hospital. And the day I was leaving hospital was the day before applications closed. And while I was sitting waiting for the discharge letter, I got a call from a leader in Toastmasters who was on the selection committee saying, where is your application? And I said, well, actually, I'm just leaving hospital. Okay, you've got 24 hours. You can do it. And so 24 hours was enough. And I put the application in, loved the role. And then again, with the encouragement of others, saw that opportunity in international leadership to serve as international director for 2 years from 17 to 19. And during that time, several people said, you'll be going forward into executive office. And my whole thing was, I have to complete the task I have at hand. That's a nice idea. My whole mindset was to say, I'm not going to close out the opportunity. I'm not going to say no to it. I'm going to park it until this task is done. And then we'll evaluate that opportunity, because it is a huge, huge commitment. And I wouldn't have started this journey if I didn't believe I could see it through in a good way to help the organisation over this time. And so I'm in the second year of that executive journey and enjoying it very much. It's a big commitment, but you're right in the heart of where some key decisions are made, but also you have the opportunity to network with people around the world and see our organisation flourish in so many different ways. At the same time, seeing the challenges that we're facing at this time and trying to work together with people to take us forward from all of that. Not a journey I could have imagined at all at the beginning when I think of going to that first meeting to meet people.
Absolutely. And getting that first spreadsheet as VPE, perhaps. Wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you, for these insights. There's so much richness, and there are lovely comments in the chat for each of you, really highlighting the fact that you've helped to establish Europe as the now 6 districts, and part of that historical journey. We really ought to, at some point, put it down in some kind of a book or a memoir from each of you and others, key figures. Maybe that's a project for District 109 for another time. Just delving a little bit deeper here. So you mentioned, some of you, about the amount of work that it takes. And I know that as division director, I tried to put in 2 or 3 hours a week. And of course, as international leaders, you put in a lot more. For the sake of time, I want to think a little bit, just asking you about the toll or the balance that you have to achieve with your personal and work life. So Morag, you mentioned your husband was also involved there as a leader. But how do you manage that? I don't know. I'm not asking for your intimate personal situations, but in terms of your work and personal life, how do you manage? So Elizabeth, I'd like to ask you first about any advice you could offer, or just how you manage.
I was actually asked this question a few years ago by a few people who were considering district leadership. And my first comment is you have to agree with the rest of your family. And this is what I needed to do at first, because at the time I started in Toastmasters, my children were small. So I had to balance that to begin with. But my husband was very supportive and had been all of the years through Toastmasters, and I really appreciate that. One of the things that I did was practice my speech in front of my children, sort of when they were, 8 and 10. And if they didn't understand what I was trying to say, then my speech was too complicated. So learned that lesson. And as well, now my children are grown and moved on, so or living their own lives and less to do with mom. So then I can do international work.
Wonderful. Wonderful. What about you, Pat, as in terms of managing your personal work life?
Well, I guess I had the good and bad fortune of being single when I was in senior leadership in Toastmasters. And so I really was in control of my own time, which brought blessings and challenges because I was not a great sleeper, and I would sleep about 3 to 4 hours a night. And the rest of the time was spent on my career and my Toastmasters. So I'm an early riser, and basically when I was president, I was very high up in my company also, and I was responsible for all the learning and development in the corporation, as well as my staff, and doing needs assessments and developing programs that came down the hallway from other people. And so it was a very demanding job. But I really believe the universe gets us in the right place at the right time. And it was such a gift for me, because at that time that I was president, for example, and balancing all of those, my full career and still a social life, still going to my club and participating there, and the things that I love, like the theater and the music and traveling. There was synergy happening between what was going on in Toastmasters to what was happening in the corporation where I was working. So there was a great sharing. And I remember many weeks picking up the phone when I was having my meeting with the CEO, Dan Rex, and talking about what was actually happening in the corporation, or that I was in a session on strategic development, or we were looking at redesigning the corporation. And so it was organizational development we were doing. And it was in parallel to what we were looking at in Toastmasters. So we had this cross-pollination of ideas that was just so profound and deep, because I didn't just think about it that this is what's happening at work. But when I was at work, I could sit there in those workshops and those work sessions and actually extrapolate things that I could then take to Toastmasters. So I loved the synergy that was created. And I just found, and I really believe that when we're passionate, we find the time, because there's always a choice in life. I could choose to sit down and watch a TV program, or I can choose to go and prepare that speech. Or I can get online and connect with people that I need to connect with, or I can go and bake a cake. It's all choice. And so we all have 24/7, 365. Everyone starts with the same bank account in terms of time. How we spend that bank account of time is our choice. And I wanted to own that responsibility and make those conscious choices. I did not watch television when I was in senior leadership in Toastmasters. It didn't have space in my world. I read a lot, and I couldn't give that up, because that's where ideas and creativity get fed for me. So I still read. I needed my 4 hours of sleep, And after that, I had maybe 10 hours a day at work. And then the rest was Toastmasters. And also to keep that balance, I was determined not to lose my friendships. I was still going to find time to go to theater. I was still going to go to musical events. I was still going to have friends over for dinner. So I really believe that we have to have our priorities straight. Just as Elizabeth said, you have to have your family. If you've got a family there, I had a grown son. You have to have your family support. You have to have your friends support. You have to have it's nice to have your club support, those people around you, and make them important, because you know what? Leadership in Toastmasters eventually will end. And when you come home and nobody's there anymore and nobody cares, or they've forgotten that you used to be their friend, that's not what this is about. I think that in the learning organization, it's to learn to manage our time, to learn our priorities, to learn what we choose to do because we're passionate, not because it'll keep us busy. So I think there's a lot of profound lessons for me as I went through and had to manage time. And because when I started in senior leadership, my son was in university and I was the bread earner. I had to pay that tuition along with him. I had to have housing. I had to have food on the table. So I had to look after those priorities in life. And I'm proud of the things that Tim and I have accomplished by working together and supporting one another. So I think that Toastmasters provides us with a laboratory for our entire life. And the other thing that I discovered in senior leadership is that we're capable of way more than we ever think we are. My great aunt Pearl, who's one of my heroes in life, used to say that we use such a small percentage of our capabilities and our potential. And so I looked at myself in senior leadership and went, this is an opportunity to expand that. What is my actual capability? Do I, I was always saying, do I need this? What do I choose? How can I do it better? And so I think that for me, it's always that learning environment. What can I learn from this?
Thank you. Thank you for those insights. With our timing, I'd like to move on to the next question and really focus that word you use, priority. And I'd like to ask to focusing on your international roles now and just giving our audience, we've got some very rich comments in the comments section. So thank you for those who are watching and listening in. Again, we're all learning as we go here. But I'd like to ask you maybe for the role that you are in now, past international president, vice president, regional advisor, and international board member, how long is the role? So maybe we do a quick summary. How long is the role? What is your major goal while fulfilling the role? So maybe you have one area of focus or one key priority. There's obviously a rich range for you to explore, but that one key thing that you think, this is what you'd like to hang your hat on. Francesco, would you go first?
David, my role is regional advisor. It lasts 15 months. In the first 3 months, you are actually shadowing the outgoing regional advisor. And I had the pleasure of shadowing none other than Pat. I learned a lot during those 3 months. And then you actually get 12 months where you are performing the role. Being a regional advisor is a little bit like being an area director for the districts. So you actually get to visit them, get to talk with them, and provide them with support, guidance, or maybe just ask questions to stimulate them to think about things they might not have thought about, or to help them keep the focus on what they're doing. So I love it because of the opportunity it gives me to work on my coaching skills. And I hope I am supporting the districts to the best that I can.
Wonderful. Great. So We'll hold you to that one. Hold you accountable as a good coach. Wonderful. Pat, what is your one priority for this period now as PIP?
Serving as a past international president is a lifetime obligation. I believe we graduate into a club that there's no exit door.
Okay.
You are, and you will continue to be, whether you're active or not. And my goal is in that organization, in that advisory committee, is to always speak my truth, to bring my viewpoints and share them openly, whether they're widely accepted or widely rejected, but to speak my experience and to uphold the values of the organization to the highest standard. Once we've served in this level of positions, as each of the panelists have, I would dare say that our hearts and souls get engaged with this organization, and we love it dearly. And we become like the parents that don't you dare hurt this organization.
Okay.
So I see that's my major role, is to speak my truth and to also always encourage, care about the member and to encourage them in their role, because we see the leaders all the time when you've been around. And you see them walk into the room. They don't have to say anything. They just have a presence, and you go,
Okay.
oh, Francesco would make a great region advisor.
Wonderful.
Thanks, David.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And Elizabeth, what is your major goal in fulfilling your role this year?
Thank you, David. As international director, as I mentioned, then I'm an ambassador for the organization. So it can mean that I go out and visit, except now at this time, it's a little bit difficult. But I also work on board committees and work with strategic actions that the board is taking. So we've had some interesting time also having to deal with COVID-related issues, and as well some other board committees that are currently ongoing. It gives me a whole new perspective on the organization to look at what is happening and how does this work with our governing documents now, but also to give the perspective that I have from the organization over all the years. So I think it's a little bit like Pat, that I want to speak the truth, I guess, but it's also being careful of what I think my truth is and whether that really applies to everyone else. But contributing to the organization for the way forward into the future.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll discuss the way forward in a moment. Morag, I'd like to ask you now as well. So your major goal in fulfilling your role this year, please.
Thank you. I see probably the most significant part of my role is being a steward of this organization for the next generation. It's actually not about me and it's not about now. It's about what comes next. And that might sound very serious, but responsibilities on the board of directors are serious. We're charged with directing and protecting the organization. So as a member of the executive, we're working very closely on the future strategic direction of the organization. Where are we headed to? Where should we be headed to? And how are we going to get there is, of course, a big part of the work that we do. And also thinking about the protect side, upholding our core values, upholding our policies. What do we stand for? And making sure that that stands in center point, that it's quite clear what we stand for. And then at the same time, being that ambassador internally and externally for the organization. And if I could personally say one thing that it really matters to me this year, it is that I care. And to remind myself when I make decisions, would this be a good decision for someone who cares about this organization today and tomorrow? And that's my kind of yardstick at the moment,
Mm.
or one of them.
Mm.
But that's really important to me as I go through that. You know,
Yeah.
and also for me, because of this journey of leadership, I'm also thinking about preparing for the next steps, because
Mhm.
I can't, because my term runs from annual business meeting to annual business meeting, so approximately a year.
Mhm.
In August next year, hopefully I'll be stepping into a different pair of shoes with different responsibilities, and I need to be ready for that. So there's, alongside the being responsible for the organization part,
Mhm.
there is that personal responsibility of
Mm.
being ready to serve at the next level as we go
Mm.
through.
Yes. I'm sure you too, Morag, have wonderful mentors, and you have, of course, the group here tonight with your rich insights. So thank you all so much. Jumping down now, I'd like to, we mentioned, I love this idea of caring, and we are in pandemic times, and this is having an effect on everything that we do at Toastmasters. And I'd just like to ask you just briefly to ask us, or to tell us, I should say, you know, what is the effect on Toastmasters, or what can our clubs do to stay above it, or to move through it, in your opinion? Elizabeth, I'd like to ask you first. So for our clubs, with this pandemic time, is there something that they could do, just briefly?
I think all of our clubs and all of our members need to remember to put the member first.
Mm.
We wouldn't be a club, we wouldn't be an organization if we didn't have members.
Mhm.
So I can remember an earlier point in time with the flu going around, and our members reached out to other members to check in they're okay. And this has to be similar, I think, today. We have to have this caring attitude that Morag mentioned. We have to have that for all our members. And if we care for other members, then they're going to stay around.
Mm. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And I really appreciate the care and openness that you've given to this interview panel discussion tonight. And due to time, we need to bring it now towards an end. So before we finish, I'd like to ask all of you to think about, or to share with us, your favorite quote or saying. So perhaps it's something that's influenced your Toastmasters journey, or it's just a personal aspect that many of you have shared tonight. So what is your favorite quote, Morag?
I love this quote from Helen Keller that says, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." Because I think that speaks to the very heart of what we do. I can live on my own, I can prepare my own speeches, but if I don't interact with others, if I don't draw on the learning of others, if I don't listen to the feedback of others, if I don't contribute to the learning of others, then I will always be limited in what I could achieve. We've heard tonight about people's journeys and how much mentors and people who saw something in us have made an impact on our individual journeys. And I think that is so important. And the same thing also for when we think about our clubs in this time, working together as a club, working together as an area, as a division, as a district, worldwide as an organization, working together to make sure that we keep delivering that purpose of Toastmasters wherever we are.
Thank you. Wonderful. Elizabeth, your quote and favorite saying.
Thank you. It's from Margaret Mead. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And I believe that's what we have within Toastmasters, committed members who can change the world.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Yes. And someone wrote here, a culture of care. It's really a nice summary of what we've spoken about tonight. Pat, what is your favorite quote or saying that's been useful in your life?
First of all, I want to say that I think the Desiderata that was written by Max Ehrmann is one of my greatest references since I began Toastmasters, because I looked at the words within it that said there'll always be greater and lesser than. So it stopped me from comparing myself. It said, it goes on, and I just invite everybody to read the Desiderata and look at the lessons it says for you individually. And I want to share one of the quotations that I have posted in my office that I read frequently. And it's by Patanjali. And he wrote, "When you're inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitations. Your conscience expands in every direction. And you find yourself in a great, new, and wonderful world." I love that. I wish I would have written it. So thank you, Patanjali.
Yeah, absolutely. And sounds like some of those conferences that we've first experienced, our mind is altered. And lastly now, Francesco, please, what is your favorite quote or saying that's been inspirational in your life?
Well, after all these serious ladies, I want to bring a lighter tone to this discussion. And I love the quote from Ralph Smedley, which says, "We learn best in moments of enjoyment." So wherever I am, whatever I'm doing in Toastmaster, I always try to make sure there is a component of something which is fun, which makes the entire thing more appealing, more interesting, and especially makes it fun. Never forget that component into whatever we do, and we will still keep on loving all we do in Toastmasters.
Thank you, Francesco. I have a spine tingle, which tells me that there's a reason for that. And really, fun and leadership and a culture of care are some of the main themes that I think we've really explored tonight. So on behalf of District 109, I would like to thank all of you, my panelists tonight, for your years of service, but also that all that you've given to us in Toastmasters through leadership and the way Europe has really grown and flourished under your leadership. We owe you a debt of gratitude for all that you have done for us. And I'm honestly very privileged. I feel very privileged to have been able to talk with you tonight. It's been an honor. And this is another episode of Mastery Matters. So thank you very much to our guests, Pat, Elizabeth, Morag, and Francesco. And to thank you to those who have watched on at home. Tonight, we encourage you to connect with your leaders and establish your own leadership journey within Toastmasters. As you read, it's a rich and rewarding experience, and serving your community is where it's at. It's a culture of care, but it's also, there is fun in leadership. Take care, everyone, and have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Lovely to see you all.